What piece of junk did you find that turned out to be valuable? I found a small envelope with a few inches of wire in a junk shop. Bought it, $2 because it had some faded penciling about Troy Oz. Turned out to about 1.5 Troy ounces of platinum wire. Sold it for $600. Years ago I bought a condo in foreclosure. We couldn't go inside. Just look from outside and put in a bid. My bid won. When I went inside the place it was pretty trashed. I checked all the rooms, calculating the costs of getting it back into shape. At the end of my walkthrough I went into the garage and saw there was a car under a tarp. I pulled the tarp back and saw a 1972 Barracuda in nearly mint condition. A first or second edition of the Oregon Trail book. It's a bit damaged, so not that valuable, but still a few hundred more than the $15 I paid for it. Found a fake Cartier watch in Goodwill for $10. Bought it because it still looked nice. But it's a real Cartier watch and it's worth $1,000 plus. Keeping it because I'd never buy myself something like that. Dad carried around a junk guitar for 50 years. Ugly as hell sunburst Gibson acoustic. Circa 50s or 60s, can't remember, that he eventually sanded down into something prettier. When I was learning he took it to be tuned up by our neighbor who owned a shop and was a collector. Dude came back exasperated and told us that my dad had sanded about $50k off the guitar and that it would have been totally worthless if he hadn't left the logo on. I found a very small, round piece of metal on the floor in my workplace. I couldn't figure out what the item was and knew I should just discard it, but felt compelled to keep it for some reason. That afternoon my coworker was distraught. The unique type of battery that her cochlear implant needed fell out and was probably in a dumpster somewhere because the cleaners had come through. I gave her the weird piece of metal in my pocket and she almost burst into tears from relief. Old folded up piece of paper in the bottom of a box my dad had I found cleaning up the house. Torn up and faded. Turned out to be a 90-year-old original Jane Carlu poster worth roughly $20,000 after spending $1,000 for restoration. Well, a dickhead couch surfer who crashed in my guest room for a few months left behind a 1970s Fender Super Twin Tube amp worth $1,800 he didn't know about. It made cleaning up his piss bottles worth it. Someone gave me a hideous purse out of a box on its way to Goodwill. I sold it on eBay for $100. I've had some good flips, but that was the best. Weird painting of a cat with birds on its back no one wanted. Paid $20. Worth $400. A few years ago, I was looking through the Goodwill website that lets you bid on stuff that you find. I stumbled across one of the Texas Goodwill's pages and then saw an auction for a huge box of phone accessories that no one was bidding on. I started looking through all the pictures, started researching some of the brands, and started realizing the whole box was worth a decent bit. I took a shot and made my bid. Someone else saw what I saw and started a bidding war with me, but I eventually won with a bid of $106, then $24 for shipping. Few days go by and I finally get the box. Well, 2 boxes, and they were both huge. Started taking inventory and ended with 100 iPhone chargers, 100 Android chargers, about 250 iPhone 8 cases in all different styles, 80 battery packs, a few iPad cases, and about 1,000 screen protectors. Turned my $130 total investment into an eBay business and made almost $8,000 in about 9 months. Edit, a word. My mom in college worked for a small grocery store. She was sweeping aisles one day when she found a bracelet and just threw it in the lost and found for someone to come back for later. Months went by and I guess the employees got to check the lost and found for anything they wanted if no one claimed it. She remembered the bracelet and just grabbed it. She got it home and cleaned it up. It ended up being a Tivol bracelet wrapped with real diamonds. It's since been turned into a new wedding band for her lol. Bought a cheap Martin guitar because I was broke and wanted to play. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it's worth a few grand now because it was a limited edition thing. It's still appreciating to the point where I had to insure it. Not me but my mom. She lives in a senior's home. Somebody died. No family. So everyone just throws his shit in the trash. My mom went out by the dumpster before the garbage truck got there to see if anything was worth grabbing. There was a very small lockbox. The cheap kind. And when she shook it, it sounded like it had a few coins inside. She worked all afternoon to jimmy it open and inside was over $600 cash and $250 in rare coins. My friends and I were at a concert and found this broken bracelet under a merch table as we were about to leave the venue. It had an interesting engraving on it. Something about being a son and friend. Because it was broken we were thinking about just tossing it, but ended up throwing it in our backpack to bring to the office later. My friend worked at the venue, so she was going to turn it in. The next week I was browsing Reddit on a thread of the same kind of music we were listening to at the show, and just as I was about to fall asleep, someone's post caught my eye. It said something like, "This is a long shot, but I lost something." And it piqued my interest, so I clicked it. It was someone from that same show asking if anyone had found a silver bracelet. Turns out it was the same one we found, and it seemed to be a special gift from the person's parent and they were looking for it. We connected and got the bracelet returned to the guy, and the whole interaction is actually in my Reddit history. It's a fun, albeit quick, read. So my family went to a nearby town's vintage sale thing. My dad found this dirty old glass milk bottle, and he got excited when he found it. I didn't know what he found so exciting, since it was just a milk bottle. After we got home, he explained that it was a milk bottle from a dairy farm. One of the co-founders of that farm was my great-great-grandfather on my dad's side. When one of the world wars began, he sold it off to the other founder. TL. Doctor, my dad found a glass milk bottle, and I found out I'm a descendant of wealthy dairy farmers. I was at an estate sale and bought a few paintings. Sweet lady told me to take the last one I liked as package deal, since I ran out of cash. Turns out one of them is a pretty rare original print worth about $3,500, and I paid maybe $30 for all 4 prints and paintings I wanted. When I was younger, I would rummage around the drawers and cabinets in my grandmother's house, just adventuring and discovering, which is what I called it. I happened to find this old folded piece of paper, but it only took 3 seconds for me to just disregard it and push it aside. I think I was trying to get something else that I saw. After I finished with whatever I had, I picked up the piece of paper to throw it away. Out of childlike curiosity, I opened it up and saw the words in it. It looked like a letter. It seemed important, so I gave it to my grandmother, who gave it to my mother when she came to pick me up. My grandmother is blind. Come to find out, it was a love letter from my grandfather to my grandmother. That really made their day. Edit. Some of y'all need to chill. I was 3 years old. My grandmother and grandfather, who isn't blind, were fine with me doing that, as long as I cleaned up after myself. I didn't give her hell. She isn't some stereotypical poor old blind grandma. She has the hearing of a bat and a hand of iron. I found a book at a trash bin. The Wind in the Willows. I never got to read it as a kid. After finishing it, I googled the edition date. Turns out it's a collectible worth $300. Question mark? Who knew? A really old dollar bill I found in an old Bible. It's worth around $100. Well, if my mom were to respond to this thread, original Harry Potter 1st edition Philosopher's Stone novel. It's very rare to find them, and they sell pretty well, but she threw it out. So salty. My father-in-law goes junking occasionally for side cash and strange gifts. One day he shows up randomly with the 1st gen Fatboy PS3 with backwards compatibility. He goes, "Hey, I don't know if you can use this, but I thought you might enjoy it." Somebody had it sitting out for garbage. I fired it up fully expecting to have to do some repairs, but it booted up and plays just fine. He refused to take any money for it. He can be a real stand-up guy. Staples put a couple copies of AutoCAD LT on clearance for like $4.90 each. I made almost $1,000 on eBay for them. Was fishing at family's cottage, pulled up a fishing rod, which turned out to be the one my grandfather passed away, got as a birthday present and loved it, but lost about 8 years ago. Bought an old copy of The Wizard of Oz at a flea market for $30. When I got home and researched it more, it turned out to be a first edition. Bought a mid-century Ottoman for $75, among other things, at an estate sale in New York City. Found out years later it's worth $3K. Saw someone selling a copy of Chrono Trigger for SNES about 20 years ago. It was a great price and you'd said for another $10 he'd throw in a bunch of other games he didn't want, including Star Fox. I was trying to start a collection at the time and figured he'd give me a box of sport games and shit you usually see filling pawn shops etc. But I figured man it's $10 so agreed. He gave me the box and thanked me for taking all the crap off his hands. I got in the car and looked through the games and there was a bunch of bad sports games and a few other meh games, but in amidst it all was this game that said Star Fox Weekend on it. I was like, WTF is that? Check eBay and the thing was selling for like $300 at the time. It's like a rare SNES cartridge they gave out to winners of a competition, or to other people who won one from Nintendo Power etc. I couldn't bring myself to bring it back / tell him. 10 years later I saw some lady on Craigslist looking for a copy of Chrono Trigger for her son for Christmas. I emailed her that I had it, and when she came to grab it, I just gave it to her for free to pay back the karma of getting that super rare game in a $10 box of junk. The thing goes for like $1,000 on eBay now. Found some sunglasses in a parking lot covered in dirt. Washed them off, and they turned out to be Ray-Bans. It was a pretty good day. Cleaning out my grandparents' house after my grandma passed away and had to throw out or donate actual hundreds of books. Most were worth nothing and very worn down. In the second to last box were original copies of the Harry Potter books. She bought each one on the day of their release. A couple years ago I bought a rifle bipod at an antique store for like $15. I was going to keep it for an airsoft gun, but it didn't have any markings on it and couldn't figure out what it was. So I made a post on a gun forum asking for info. Turns out I bought a 65-ish-year-old bipod for an experimental version of the M14 rifle. There were only about 5 of my bipod ever made, and the guys sent me pictures from a rifle museum backing it all up. I sold it a day later for $400, but they told me if I found the right buyer it'd be worth $800-1000. In 2004 my grandfather showed me a locked chest in the storage of his home when I was 15. Then he said to me the key is on my cabinet. They promised me to open it when he dies. I kept his promise until he died this January 2020. He died at 101 years old. I got the keys of the locked chest on his cabinet then opened the chest. When I opened it the things in there were mostly love letters, encyclopedias, maps, records from famous singers. But the valuable thing I found was jewelry and a Rolex and Seiko watch which is under perfect condition. When I was a little kid I liked to climb under and hide inside the racks of clothes when my mom was shopping. One time I found what I thought was one of those cheap 25-cent plastic rings that you put a quarter into the machine and it spits out. I think that was basically my only understanding of what a ring was at that age. But I showed my mom what I had found, and as it turns out it was a massive diamond engagement ring. I specifically remember that it had tape around it, which my mom explained was probably because it was too big, and whoever was wearing it was trying to make it more snug to their finger. We gave it to the teenager girls who were working the cash register, hoping the person who lost it would return looking for it, and it would get returned. My mom says she kind of regrets doing that because she thinks that the girls probably pawned it and split cash. Probably should have taken it to the police or something, but who knows. I like to think that it did make its way back to the rightful owner. My dad and I are both mechanics and DIYers. We both try to see how many tools we can find on the side of the road. It's shocking how many things are left behind at work sites or else fall off of trucks. A few of the things we've found: 2 framing hammers, 2 measuring tapes, a 40 push broom, various ratchet straps, a functional flute multimeter, a 5 crowbar, and various other odds and ends. Always keep your eyes peeled. Sometimes this pastime can be dangerous when it involves pulling over on the highway, so be careful. So my mom and I were helping a family friend deep clean the house to sell. Not rich, but not poor. Well, I found these cool colorful sketch style art prints all rolled up in a corner of his shop. He told us that we could keep them since he wasn't much of an art guy. Turns out the signatures on the prints was Dali. I had been to a Dali and Picasso exhibit in Rome, so I recognized the signature. We had them appraised. They were worth quite a bit. Out of respect, we told the guy who gave them to us. He asked for them back, and then he ghosted us with the prints. We aren't in touch with him anymore. Never found out what happened with them. Edit. Removed irrelevant information. When I was 17, I found a driver's license on the ground from a guy who was 22 and resembled me a fair bit. Rarely had a problem getting into bars or clubs with it. It was priceless tbh. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.